a very short amount of time to talk about imperialism, and in particular, big tech imperialism and how AI will just enable bigger tech imperialism. So to start with, obviously, definitions. The definition of imperialism is the extension of a nation's authority by territorial acquisition or by the establishment of economic and political dominance over other nations. And so we can easily swap some of those words out and think about what corporations do. And in that case, the extension of a corporate's authority by acquisition or by the establishment of economic and political dominance, ecosystems, lobbying, over other, and in some case nations. We have seen corporations lobby entire nations or states in America, in terms of where Amazon wants to build its next data center. So I want just everyone to draw the analogy between imperialism and tech companies basically taking the practices of imperialist nations. Whether they're doing it consciously or unconsciously, it is happening. So just some, let's talk about US imperialism through its big tech companies. When you think about Meta, they have billions of users. You can refer to them as digital citizens. So in that sense, America's power extends, digitally beyond its, I guess, physical borders and other nations which it occupies, like Hawaii. And then you have many governments and education systems literally being run on platforms by American corporations. Predominantly, Microsoft and Google serve those sectors. Apple has a little bit of a play in, I think, education, not so much in government, at least not in New Zealand. And now when we think about AI, soon many foreign governments will be run by AI models trained by American corporations, trained predominantly on Western data, or in some cases, American data. And while we're here to talk about policy, I want to ask the rhetorical question, or sort of make the statement that there really is no incentive to regulate an industry that helps the US maintain its global dominance. And so as long as America continues to be an imperialist nation, I really struggle to see how any of our policies are going to change what America wants to do. And we obviously need to look at the current situation in Palestine and Ukraine and sort of the dichotomy of the way in which the US decides whose sovereignty we should fight for. So some practical examples of what I mean by big tech imperialism. I think Amazon is a great case. We had sort of price fixing with ebooks. We have walled gardens, sort of app stores, closed ecosystems, the fact that you have 2 operating systems to choose from on your mobile devices, platforms wanting to keep you in their platforms via in-app browsers rather than giving you the freedom to choose which browser you should use. The sort of sign in with kind of reinforces global dominance of particular platforms. You have to be on Google or Facebook in some cases to sign into some online services. And then you have other nuanced ways of doing it where, companies create entire programming languages, which, don't get me wrong, from a technical perspective, there's some merit. But in the case of like PyTorch, Facebook has made a really good effort to make sure that all these students are learning PyTorch so that they can build a workforce for their organization. I think open source at its core is really important, but we see that being taken advantage of by the industry, especially now with AI acquisitions, as I mentioned, and obviously lobbying in government. So there's always been this idea of the democratization of tech and the internet and web and now AI. But are democracies and imperialism actually compatible? Like, can we actually democratize tech? Because I don't feel like we're there yet, despite all of our efforts. And so I want to specifically talk about NLP in this case to kind of give you an example of something not as bad as genocide, and maybe that most people don't even think about. But to us, it's important as indigenous people who are fighting to revitalize their language and their culture. So Facebook and other companies have these, in Facebook's case, something called No Language Left Behind. They all want to help us and save all the languages of the world, which I think, in principle is good. Now we have products like ChatGPT that can speak indigenous languages. Apparently it speaks Maori and Hawaiian. Obviously, if you are fluent in those languages, it thinks in English, but it kind of spits out Hawaiian and Maori. And I want to point out that Hawaiians and Maori have worked for free to build some of the foundational tools that have enabled machine translation into our languages. Let's go back to the sort of early 20th century in Hawaii, where we are now a territory at the time of the US. And the American propaganda at the time was encouraging people to speak American, as they meant to speak English, but America, right? So speak American, and here you have like a quite ethnically diverse population, Hawaii, Filipinos, Hawaiian, Chinese, et cetera, not being encouraged to speak their mother tongue. And in some cases, my grandfather, for example, our people were spanked or beaten for speaking their language, even in schools. And that's why my grandfather did not teach Hawaiian to my uncles and aunties and my father. And that is the history of language loss for our people. And of course, today, now we have an American corporation selling Hawaiian language as a service, claiming to be the world's best way to learn Hawaiian, which is obviously not true. But for those developers in the room, that's a template, and they just replace sort of languages with other languages, and et cetera. And so here's an example of machine translation and what it looks like and how it reinforces biases. So this is Google Translate. Ke kaha wahine ma means like be strong women. Ma, sort of like, you folks or them. But in this case, Google says it means let white women be strong. Kia ora wahine ma is hello women, collectively women, and it says save white women. That's Google Translate. And so what do we get in terms of digital democracy in a capitalist society? These are the numerous Hawaiian language translation apps you can get from the Play Store. I think even in Apple Store, you might find this as well, maybe not as much. None of these are built by Hawaiians for Hawaiians. They all actually use Google's translation API and are generating money through selling ads, basically. And so it's pretty much a spam approach. And they do this for every language that basically Google supports, and just sort of automate building these apps. And so this is the privilege that we now are afforded to our language, thanks to the democratization of translation for Hawaiian. And so my equivalent, or my analogy, is the ABC store. So for those of you who've been to Hawaii, you might have gone to ABC store and bought a little lei or an aloha shirt. It's a trinket. It's not made by Hawaiians. The money doesn't actually go to Hawaiians. ABC is a Japanese-owned company. I think they're actually more of a real estate company like McDonald's. But it kind of dumbs down our culture and just commercializes us in sort of cultural appropriation, et cetera, et cetera. So now I want to talk about AI, and we're basically saying the same thing again, and I probably already have run out of time. So there was some good discussion about third-party suppliers with Google earlier. So I believe Lionbridge is a third-party supplier of Google. In 2018, 2019, Indigenous people were being solicited for their voices. Please read your language, about an hour of your language. We'll pay you $45. We care about languages of the world. We want to build technologies for them, so your languages are included, et cetera, et cetera. This is an email sent to Maori. This is an email sent to Hawaiians. Samoans were sent emails. Other Indigenous people were sent emails. Red flags were going up left and right. We all knew this was going on, but who was funding it and why were they doing it? That we didn't really know, and we kind of don't know yet, but we have some hints. And so then not long later, we have a few things. We have one particular data set called Flores, which is hundreds of phrases, English phrases, that have been translated into multiple languages. And that is being treated as sort of like a base data set for machine translation benchmarking. Now take that data set and get a bunch of people from all those languages, native speakers of those languages, to now read those phrases. And that's what this Fleurs data set is. So we think that solicitation by Lionbridge actually led to this paper here, which is now hundreds of languages, an audio corpus of hundreds of languages. Meta and Google are listed as key people in this research paper. And then about a year ago, we hear of this thing called Whisper. Well, most people didn't hear of Whisper. It was literally a whisper, but about end of September, OpenAI dropped this multilingual ASR model, trained on 680,000 hours of audio. They didn't tell us where it came from. And if you dig through it, you can see that they had 1,300 hours of Te Reo Māori and about 400 hours of Olol Hawaii. So now all of a sudden, we've got this non-sort of Hawaiian Māori corporation having the ability to do ASR for our languages, democratization of our languages. As of today, you can pay OpenAI to access Maori language as a service. And I also highlighted Welsh here because, in terms of the history of imperialism, right? Welsh and Gaelic languages were suppressed by the UK government, and they have had a renaissance. But, just to point out, American corporates are trying to profit from that as well. The real important thing here is that they say they are only releasing their API for languages that perform less than a 50% word error rate. And apparently that is an industry standard benchmark. Where's our standards, people? Is 50% a good metric by which to base a standard? You might as well just flip a coin and get your mate to do the ASR for you. So not only is that really poor, but actually the data that is used in that benchmark is total crap. First of all, it's English utterances that have then been translated by Google Translate. We've assessed the translations. They were done by Google Translate, not actual Te Reo Māori speakers or Hawaiian speakers. And then non-speakers of those languages read those utterances, which now are going into this data set and is being used to create multilingual ASR models by these big tech companies. And lo and behold, you can download an app on your Mac and run Whisper locally and synthesize Maori, which is, So this is the future I see that we're going to get. This is a bunch of like OpenAI, ABC stores, just, crap models, meaning to reach as many people as possible and just do a half-assed job at providing a service because ultimately they're there to maximize on profits, not to maximize on the benefits to our marginalized communities. So how do we fight this? For us, it's about empowering communities to lead the change that they need. And we don't need outsiders to come in and save us. And I think Te Hiku Media is a great example, just benchmarks. This is our ASR trained on, it's a bilingual model that can code switch between Te Reo Māori and New Zealand English. We don't have billions of dollars. We didn't have to steal any data. Our model is significantly better than what sort of OpenAI and Facebook's models do off the shelf. Other more practical things is we need to break up big tech. We need to fight imperialism. And unless we're going to do that, I don't think much of the policies we're trying to fight for here are actually going to happen. Citizens need the right to choose whether they want to use AI or not and what type of AI they want to use. I should be able to pull Siri off of my device and run my own Hawaiian Maori mixed model because that's who I am and that's what represents me and that's what I want in a digital society. Interoperability, I don't need to talk about that. We heard a lot about that, which is very important. A distributed network of AI as opposed to a single AI to rule them all. And that's apparently the approach that big tech are taking, right, is an AGI approach, which does not work. None of us operate. It's the diversity of human beings and our daily interactions that is what makes life exciting. And then finally, there's the Kaitiakitanga license, which is a license we've worked on that ensures the benefits actually go back to the communities from which the data was gathered or in some case taken, that those communities are empowered by those technologies rather than just as a way to make a profit. So my final closing statement is there is no AI without data. It's absolutely critically important. So how do we fight it? Just stop giving them your data, right? And they won't build their tools. And then finally, actually, that's not my closing sentence. Data equals land from an Indigenous perspective. They've taken our land and now they're back for our data. Thank you.